Demand for data center services is growing at an ever-increasing rate. Across the globe, especially in developing nations and growing economies, everything from social media to government services are looking to digital infrastructure as a basis on which to develop and service the growing user base. However, as the industry grows, so does its use of energy power. With studies placing global data center energy consumption at anywhere between 1 to 3%, the engines of the digital economy do eat up a lot of the resources, almost the same as the entire global airline industry. Yet, the sector has strived to turn the page and become more sustainable, not only from a power consumption standpoint, but also water consumption and a better relationship with the natural world and populations. The emergence of several industry associations, bodies, pacts, you name it, are just the tip of the iceberg of the thousands of hours spent discussing and implementing planet-friendly strategies and technology. Especially at a time when for investors the theme really is go green or go home, operators not only have the responsibility to help curb the sector's impact on the climate, but are also under extreme pressure to attract capital for growth. All this has led energy and digital infrastructure manufacturer Schneider Electric to launch the Guide to Environmental Sustainability Metrics for Data Centers that lays out a set of 23 key metrics. These 23 metrics are sorted into 5 categories spanning the full spectrum of environmental sustainability, and they ranked across 3 levels of achievement, from beginning to advanced to leading. The key message around all this really is no one is alone in this transition, and also that this isn't a sprint, but a journey. So to talk about that journey, joining me now from Paris and to talk to the industry's current state of the energy marketplace and where it's all headed is Rob McKernan, Senior Vice President for Secure Power for Europe at Schneider Electric. Rob, it's a pleasure to see you again. It's been a very long time. I believe the last time I saw you was in 2019. I can't remember what month, but it was in 2019. So it's been 3 years now. So welcome on board. Welcome on the show. And let's jump right in. So data centers, as I said, they consume around 1 to 3% of the world's energy, sort of in line with what the airline industry consumes at the moment. How do you see that? How do you see those figures, and how do you expect that to change in the future?
Yeah, it's great to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me. And a lot has changed over the last few years since we last spoke. It used to be we were talking about reliability and availability. Now the conversation is about energy efficiency. It's about sustainability. It's about energy security. And yes, one airline in the data center industry is roughly the same. It represents about 2%. Each of those represents about 2% of the world's energy, and that's been kind of a number that's grown a little bit, but it hasn't grown as fast as data centers themselves have grown. So the industry has made real good progress, I would say, towards reducing the environmental impact. And a lot of that's been around energy efficient technologies. It's been about the designs have improved in terms of the PUE of data centers. We have here in Europe at least seen an adoption of renewables. So while the growth of data centers is going to continue to boom, I think it's fair to say that this is a number that will remain flat, and then eventually, again, as we continue to adopt newer technologies, more renewables, I think you're going to see that number come down, and it's going to come down, and the leadership of that is really happening here in Europe.
So when you see those headlines of like data centers will consume 8, 10, 12%, sometimes 20% of the world's energy, you think that's just scaremongering?
A little bit. I just think people don't appreciate the amount of technology and the amazing rapid pace of technology that data center operators, the internet giants, and companies like Schneider Electric, the manufacturers, the collective efforts we have done in this industry have led to great strides overall in efficiency, and there's no doubt in my mind that it'll lead to a much more sustainable data center future.
Okay. I mean, as you mentioned, the industry has done great strides into becoming more green. Even on the green financing side of things, we've seen a lot of people raising bonds and loans and all that to really improve their carbon footprint. But what would you say data center operators, what are they still not doing right? What are they still missing in their sustainability strategies and implementations?
You know, as far as sustainability goes, I think there's a lot I think there's a lot that the operators can do. I think the new data centers that we're building here in Europe and throughout the world, they can be ultra sustainable. There's a lot of, via technology, via renewables, better operations. I think there's a lot of good going on. But I would say that the modernization of what's legacy, even data centers may have been built 3-4 years ago, that is where there's a lot that needs to be addressed. So you have the upgrades in power and cooling systems. You have better energy management and automation of the data center itself. You have the very simplified view of being able to measure your energy usage and your emissions. There's a lot of these strategies that are being put in place for the new data centers, but they may not have been done from the old ones. And I would say that the interesting thing I would say is the conversation today versus 6 months ago versus a year ago has greatly improved, and it's a stronger one. We see more and more customers, sort of setting a bold and actionable strategy. We didn't see that a year ago. We're seeing that the designs continue to focus on energy efficiency. It used to be around PUE and maybe even low cost design, but now I think energy efficiency is playing a major role inside of the data center design. We do see the ability, and we see more and more focus on driving efficiency in operations, although I still think that is one of the bigger opportunities we have. Certainly everyone is talking about buying renewable energy, which is easier in some geographies, a little bit more challenging in others, but that's going to continue to evolve. And then another large focus is around the whole supply chain, right? And that's where companies like Schneider has with our supply chain, with our suppliers, and you start going to what some people refer to as scope 3 and things like that. I think there is focus, but it comes from the CEO of these operators, and they are driving sustainability as a major message throughout, which is great news.
No, that's amazing. And I mean, you touched on the supply chain topic, which I mean, it's a massive topic in the world that we live in at the moment.
Yes.
And with Schneider as well. Just before I even go into the next question, because it's all kind of embroiled in the same question, have you seen, from a Schneider perspective, have you seen operators kind of plan much more ahead to kind of avoid those supply chain issues? So have you seen them buying a lot more from you, or at least reserving a lot more in advance to the projects that they're putting on the ground?
Yeah, so we're having in-depth conversations in terms of what I would call capacity planning. So what is our capacity from a manufacturing perspective, whether it's low voltage, medium voltage, cooling, UPSs, et cetera? What is their forecasted demand over the next, it used to be we'd talk about demand over the next 6 to 9 months. Now we're talking over the next 18 to 36 months.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about standardization more of the design. So the more we can take a unit and use it for whether it's in Frankfurt or Stockholm or Madrid, et cetera, if we can, because they may change, their order of build may change. They just know they're building in these cities potentially, but which one's first is their customer demand, right? So the more we can kind of have very standardized design, very standardized offer, then that's where the supply chain planning is starting to really take hold. And we've been doing that now for probably the last 6 to 9 months, and we're planning out that far, which is good that the industry is getting better at that, to be honest with you.
No, that's quite amazing, because I mean, 18 to 36 months from 6 months before, that's planning really in advance. And that really ties in with my next question around sustained demand. Because sometimes, I mean, we've seen it with COVID, the demand for data centers just boomed to a whole different level from pre-COVID demand. How can operators kind of sustain their sustainable strategies when demand really grows, and not just take the shortcut and go for whatever it's available instead of whatever is better for the environment?
Yeah, it's interesting because you have those two dimensions, and then it's still tied into a third dimension, which was that supply chain question, right? So you have, a strong demand, a very compromised supply chain, and this need of a strong sustainability strategy. And I think, to be quite frank, I think the operators are a little bit struggling with this because they have very demanding customers who have very demanding deadlines on getting something built. But I think the single most important thing is to understand that what is the longer term play, because there is no doubt about it that the large users of these data centers do have very specific, very publicly stated carbon goals in place. So if you're just going to meet the short-term need and build quickly and build maybe inefficiently or not sustainability, it may win you the short-term contract, but it's long-term not going to be a data center that's going to withstand. And the demand coming from the internet giants is very, very frank, and they're putting it in their RFQs, the need for efficiency, the need for a carbon neutral data center eventually. And so I think that's what's happening. So I think most of the sophisticated customers are balancing that decently. And I think that's a major piece of their equation and their strategy and how to manage that better. But they know that they just can't focus on the short-term win and not focus on the long-term. So I think it's a great question that doesn't have a perfect answer, but it's one that is without a doubt going forward in the minds of everyone involved in this process.
I think what's so fascinating about this specific topic around sustainability is that a lot of questions, they don't have answers yet, or at least not properly designed answers yet. And actually, my next question is also doesn't have a designed answer to it yet, because it's around how you measure these things. Because you can throw as much cash as you want at being green, you can plan ahead as much as you want, but if you don't know what to measure, how to measure, and then how to report what you measure, and who do you report it to be honest, I guess things won't be going the same direction for everyone in the industry. The industry won't be going the same direction. Each operator might be going their own direction. So what's our view around measurements? Let me make that simple. So what do you think needs to be measured? How do you measure it? And then who or how or where do you report it to?
Yeah, simple adage: you can't manage and you can't improve what you don't measure, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think there's been a good focus on starting to understand and benchmark, and there's some clients that are leading the way in this, and others that are maybe lagging. So I was recently on a panel a couple months ago with some of the industry, and one of the things on that panel that became really apparent is that everyone is going about it differently. They have different measurements, or they're putting a different type of lens on it, maybe one that's maybe more advantageous to them, I'm not sure. But it really, as an industry, I think we'll do this in Europe first and hopefully expand this, but I think as an industry, we're going to really move forward with standardized and consistent benchmarks and consistent measurable and start reporting on that as well. I think you're going to see manufacturers like Schneider pushing that. You're going to see the internet giants sort of pushing for this sort of standardization, and we're trying to be out in front of that, because we think that there's a little bit more to this equation than just one simple metric, and that's where we came out with just recently, a few months ago, kind of our sustainability metrics, in sort of saying, hey, industry, here's our first attempt at this. Let's see what you think. Let's start building around this standardized format. Let's tweak it. Let's improve it. But let's at least all agree on some way to look at this. So as an industry, we can dictate out what we're doing and how we're doing it, versus having a regulation or something come down on us and say, oh, you must do it this way. I think we're better situated as an industry to be the voice out, versus, again, being told what to do, if you will.
Just before we go into what Schneider launched a couple of weeks ago, who do you think is going to sort of manage all this? Because as I said, so Schneider puts some metrics out, some other players are also putting things out, especially operators, especially the big operators and the hyperscalers. But who do you think is going to oversee everything? Do we need a new body? Are we talking about things like the climate neutral pact? Who do you think is going to be at the top, kind of assimilating all the information that's going to come out of these metrics and measurements and reporting?
Yeah, you remember, like as an industry, we over the years we've done things like this pretty well, right? There's always been the green grid over in the U.S. Here in Europe, I think the EU DCA is doing some really good things around taking the lead and engaging with government bodies and putting things in place. So I personally think, and again, I've lived here in Europe now for 6 years. I personally think that it's best if we in Europe, because we're in the forefront of this energy crisis, and we have to manage and measure that, and we do it within a group here in Europe, and then I think we take that and expands and goes global.
Okay, sounds interesting. So let's talk about Schneider then, because you launched the Schneider Electric Data Center Sustainability Metrics Drive strategy. So talk us through that. Like, I mean, what was the process of coming up with it, and what does it include? Because there's a lot of clauses to it, if we can call them clauses.
It's definitely involved, but what we saw, if we go back a year ago, we saw clients that were really struggling with this question of sustainability. They were just talking to us in a general way, saying, wow, we're being asked as part of an RFQ to talk about what are emissions during operations. They're talking, it's more than just efficiency, right? It's more than just PUE. It wasn't just some sort of, they used to have like a simple data point that they may or may not report on. Now it was more all encompassing. And we said that they were all going about it just a different way. So there was no standardization. There was no any sort of reporting going on. And it was interesting. I saw it a lot here in Europe. My counterparts saw it maybe a little more recently in the US. There were different parts of the world seeing it at different point. But in the end, we kind of got in a room and said, hey, to make progress on this, we believe as Schneider that we need to develop a standard set of metrics that is necessary for this industry, that if we had a framework in place that'll empower the sector to sort of take consistent, measurable action to minimize the environmental impact. Because again, you want to set with the metrics, and you want to sort of alter, change behavior, and as an industry we just get smarter and smarter on this, and that's how real change comes versus maybe one-off from time to time. So I think that's what we really did. And I think what we did is we introduced the white paper. It's called White Paper 67, with this framework, with our approach and what we think is a good approach. It is involved. It's not for the weary. We have 11 metrics in the beginning. We have 18 for advance, and so on and so forth. And we can get you all those things. But for us, it was really about 5 things: energy usage, greenhouse gas emissions, water, which, as you know, is becoming more and more of a topic, waste, and then the whole land and biodiversity, which gets into the overall supply chain and circular economy of all the stuff that we do here, especially as you look at those legacy data centers from 10, 15 years gone past. So we see customers looking to adopt things like this, which is really exciting for us, yeah.
No, I can imagine. And I mean, I was actually in a meeting this morning, and we talked about someone wants to buy a data center. It was a conversation around people that want to buy a data center, and there's a data center which is over 20 years old, up for sale with a very good returns, to be honest, very good EBITDA.
Yeah.
But it's those, I think those metrics, especially those 5 categories in the general view, they kind of match what's really needed for facilities like that, because in the retrofitting and really making sure they are green and sustainable for the 21st century, it's a completely different story. But would you like to maybe expand a little bit more in each of those 5 categories? So tell us more what's included within the energy category, what's included within the greenhouse gases, what's included within water, especially water, waste, and then of course land and biodiversity, because even this last one has become a really big topic, especially in Europe. We've seen a lot of this, especially in Ireland, with a lot of projects there.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, and I'll go quickly, and so I make sure everyone kind of understands. But I think energy is probably the most obvious one. Energy consumption is something that's on top of minds of CIOs, CEOs, and CFOs are actively looking for measurement of that. I think it's interesting, with the improved designs, we have eliminated I think the number is like 80% of energy losses over the years. So, the hyper focus on PUE has been a good thing. But this is what CIOs are selecting and investing in technologies that will help improve energy efficiency and technology. They do it with their IT equipment, they do it with the data center design. And so I think energy is obviously the classic one. Greenhouse gas emissions, the second one is obviously the one that's really, really interesting. And I think this is where you look at the type of equipment that we have, energy efficient equipment. For instance, we're very excited about our SF6 medium voltage gear, which is much better for CO2 emissions than all the existing medium voltage. So when you talk about that data center from 20 years ago and you look at the different technologies just in medium voltage, you would see a real need for retrofitting and upgrade. You see also the emissions, that's where scope 3 comes into play. So, it's not just the end product that we have and the efficiency of the product we have, but how we handle that through the entire supply chain. So all our raw materials and companies like Schneider Electric are doing that very, very systematically. And that's another one of those challenges we talked about a little bit earlier, where the short-term needs of demand versus making sure that the supply chain with maybe your secondary or third supplier on a piece of equipment are as focused on this as we have. So there's that piece of the equation. But I'd say that greenhouse gas emissions and the entire supply chain is key. Water is an interesting one. We had a stat that in the US alone, data centers consumed 175 billion gallons of water in 2020. And if you think of the growth of data centers at a 10, 12% clip, that means this year will be well over 200 billion gallons of water just in the US. And you can easily, see what that would equate to from a global perspective. So I think water is imperative that we address this use, and it's another key area that the climate neutral data center pact in Europe for operators is looking at for 2030. And again, I think our efficiency in terms of some of the products that we're designing and the future designs, you'll see more and more focus on the water. Fourth area is waste, and I think there is, like any industry, I think the data center has a significant amount of waste during not only the operations, but also the construction. So how do you utilize recycling, reuse of equipment, reuse of materials through these different processes? And again, I think this is one that as an industry we do fair, but when you get back to the retrofit conversation, this is one that is really, really interesting for maybe some of the older data center operators, ones that have been around for 10, 15 years and put in place. And then finally, of course, it's land and biodiversity. The footprint of data centers is, yes, it's relatively small compared to other industries like mining or agriculture and things like that. But we think as this group and as this industry grows, we have to continue to manage, monitor, and really, really focus on this. Really, really key. So again, I want to make sure that there's a message on some of these areas. I think as an industry, we're doing a really good job. And then some of these last ones around land, biodiversity, waste, and things like that, I think it does become more of a conversation of how do we start thinking through this and planning for the future, and at least start with the bare measurement of all these things, and then from that we start to develop strategies. Because I don't think we're still new in this journey on sustainability. We don't have all of this figured out as a company or as an industry, but we continue to build off these things.
It's about the journey. It's a journey, not a sprint. I would say. But I mean, especially the land and biodiversity, I find that quite important. Mainly as the wider public starts getting more involved with this industry, especially with the bigger projects, when they want to build a data center in the middle of a forest and you've got to knock down some trees and all that. That really generates a lot of public interest in the data center space, and we just cannot shut our eyes to those people, to those cities and villages.
And as you know, I mean, data centers used to be 4 or 5 cities here in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can tell you that
Everywhere.
you know we have it's everywhere. We have 20 cities that we're really focused. It's amazing this growth, and some cities like Amsterdam, for instance, they're the how the cities have expanded in terms of we used to be just in one little area. Now it's 4 or 5 different areas throughout Amsterdam. So it's really interesting how as we expand and as we get more and more focus on this, how this will become more of an issue. And in places like Brazil and others, I know they're going through these types of topics as well.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see the data center clusters popping up everywhere across the world, but then within the same regions as well. I think it's a very good point that you make, the expansion of the data center economy within a certain region.
Yes.
And the creation of new clusters. But Rob, I mean, but on this journey towards becoming green and turning your business green and all that, sometimes it can be quite overwhelming, and it's hard to know where to start. What would you suggest for someone that's looking at this now? I mean, can we say for the first time? I guess no one, it seems, will be looking at this for the first time. I would hope, I guess.
I hope not. Right, yeah.
But if someone is at an early stage of their journey towards green, what kind of tips and advice have you got for them to try and figure out where to go from an early stage of becoming sustainable?
You know, it's funny. I had this exact conversation about 6 weeks ago on site at a data center in Eastern Europe. Existing data center, and I said quite simply that, you know, just get started with the measurement. You know, track your energy consumption, PUE, renewable, track your greenhouse gas emissions, scope 1, maybe scope 2. Obviously, scope 3 is impossible right now for you all. Track your water consumption, be very, very precise. And then let's see where you are. And then from there, we can work with clients and say, okay, how do we, you know, what can we do to reduce the water? What's the technology solution on improving your PUE? How do we look at your operations and start becoming more intelligent on, you know, when we use the energy, how we use the energy, what does day versus night look like, and develop those strategies. The other interesting thing is we're encouraging companies to start having more conversations with their utility and start embracing that relationship, because I do think that relationship between manufacturers, operators, utilities, I think that's going to become a real smart way in terms of dealing with some of these conversations as the utilities also evolve in their approach to these questions. So it's really, I think it's an interesting thing, because no one company can do it themselves. No, you know, Schneider does a lot of great things, but we can't do it ourselves. We have to involve the utility. There has to be this holistic approach to improving all and how this is going to work together.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if there's a kind of a general message to the industry, is you're not alone.
Yeah.
Everyone is in it together. A little bit, maybe that's a bit too dramatic with the things that's gone on over the last few years, but from an industry perspective, no one is alone in this journey. But and then Rob, you launched the metrics a few weeks ago. So there's been enough time to get some feedback and adoption rates and all that. How have people taken what Schneider has put out to the markets around sustainability?
I think the reaction's been great. Both the customers have wanted to hear what we're saying. They've wanted to have a dialogue, even in some cases a healthy debate in terms of what their approach is versus something we've said. And again, I think that conversations and that engagement is really good, and it's leading to an adoption of this framework, or at least every company is starting to put their framework, whether it's exactly this or an offshoot of this, in place, which is really good. I also think that it's leading to interesting conversations with not just the operators, but their end users, with analysts, with industry associations. So there's been a lot of really good discussion that we're a part of, and I think from that, it's going to lead, like I said, it's going to lead to more and more of an industry-wide acceptance, which I think is really, really positive.
And then, of course, this is not a conversation that gets done in one day. and this is not a static document as well. Are we going to see, or when can we expect an updated, longer version of the metrics based on what people are telling you?
Yeah, we don't have a specific timeline that we've announced to updated version, but I'm a big believer in continuing to use this as a living, breathing, updated document. So you can be sure you'll see us continue to take what we have based on that feedback we've gotten from customers and end users, like understanding some practices that they're doing that may have not made it into this document the first time, that seems to be really resonating in an effective way to do it. Because again, like you said, it's not a sprint, it is a journey. Let's see how that we can do this as together. So yes, we'll definitely be updating this document going forward.
Okay, and then I mean, so beyond the metrics as well, because Schneider is a big green player, not just on the logo front and the colors of the company, but he's on the sustainability front. And I mean, and your CEO, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, is one of the world's leading sustainability advocates. What else is Schneider doing around greening the industry, greening the world? I believe you still have the slogan to say "Life is on," which is all about being green power as well. So, I mean, give us an overview of what else are you doing and what else you've got in the drawer that we're going to be seeing in the next few months.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We just announced our earnings yesterday, and part of that is our half-year sustainability report. And the headline is "We're on track for our own in-house sustainability goals for 2022," which is quite impressive, because I think this would be a year that most companies would be challenging on, given all the other things going on in the world ahead. I think you see us, we're going to continue being driving that digital transformation with not only data centers, but with energy grids, buildings, and industrial facilities. And we have a real dedicated focus to each one of those, and focus on all those things. So you constantly see us upgrading, updating our offer. You'll see in the earnings there was a few interesting acquisitions. One was named AutoGrid, and some of the things they're doing, connecting the grid together and making sure the sustainability is focused, working with again, in every industry, it's working with all the different players in that industry going forward. So a lot going on, and every single product now, every design, every product design comes into play with sustainability. Is not as a nice to have, but it's on the first page. Okay, how does this address the focus on sustainability? And I think you'll continue seeing that with everything we do.
Okay, and then Rob, if we were to catch up in 12 months' time on the 29th of July 2023, what would you expect to have changed in the industry over the next 12 months around sustainability?
So I would think, and I would hope, I would say this. I would say that Europe will be ahead, and you'll see a very strong commitment to the measurement of all the ESG pieces within the data centers. I think you'll see that that the industry here in Europe will have a strong plan, and players will all have a strong plan towards that 2030 goal of carbon neutrality, not only there, but in the extended ecosystem. I think you'll see that that the focus on net zero supply chain will have more of a plan in place for that. And I think you'll see us sort of coming together on a common framework that is in place for Europe, and that will become sort of the blueprint for the rest of the world. So I think we're going to have a very, very exciting year in terms of this topic, and I think we'll make a lot of headway, as we normally do as an industry, where we really will take off and drive this.
It's funny you use the word excited, because I was about to say it's fair to say that you are excited about where things are going.
I am. It's been really interesting, this whole process, because I think it's a scary conversation, but it's one that, like anything, I'm very proud of this industry, because I think this industry, we've always done things the right way, and we're always ahead of other industries. And I think this is going to be yet another example of that going forward.
Yeah, and I think there's also the human side of the industry, because everything we do, from providing, data power to be able to power the world and the internet and the economies and all that, on the sustainability front, is also going to have an impact on nature and people and societies and countries.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's quite exciting, and especially we are the beginning of their journey. We're still a young industry in
Very
some
young.
ways. So this is a young conversation within a young industry, and an industry that it's not even probably 1/4 or 1/5 built
Exactly.
around the world. So I think that's what's very exciting.
Exactly.
But Rob McKern, Senior Vice President of Secure Power for Europe at Schneider Electric, thanks so much for talking to me. And that's all from us here at the Tech Capital. Thank you for watching, and do check our website and give us a follow on social media for more breaking and timely news from across the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At the Tech Capital, your leads, we report. Bye for now.